Because money's more than just money, right? It's not just, the thing that we earn and what we use to spend, save, or invest.
And all of those points that we grew up with also dictate the way we treat labor and how we treat our spouses in the home.
Hello, and welcome to Financials Podcast Future Rich. I'm your host, Barbara Ginty, and I'm also a CFP. And we are here with our last episode of the season, and we are super excited to be joined by Heather and Douglas Bonaparth and talk about their new book here, Money Together. Because as we all know, one of the most interesting topics that we discuss on the podcast is how do couples handle their finances? Because it is not a one size fits all. And so now we have a new guide that we can use about how to handle your money as a couple. So thank you both for joining us. I'm very excited to share your new book and your wisdom with our listeners. You both have very impressive resumes. Doug, you're also a CFP. Heather, you're a lawyer. So power couple here. So why don't you give us a little bit about your backgrounds and how you met?
Ladies first, Heather.
All right. My name is Heather. I am a recovering corporate attorney. That's the way I usually say it to people. I spent over a decade in the commercial insurance industry, at one point in private practice, but for the majority of my tenure, I was in-house in various roles in legal departments and general counsel's office. So risk is not foreign to me. That's something I understand intimately. On our first maternity leave with our older daughter, Hazel, I helped write our first book together, which was all about helping millennials achieve financial freedom. And that was when we were in our late 20s and early 30s. And now here
Not
we
your
are.
usual maternity leave, I will say.
Don't call it a maternity leave if you're going to work the whole time. There's a lot to unpack about that. But then, on the tail end of COVID, I joined Bone Fide Wealth full time. I left the corporate world, and I joined the firm as our director of business and legal affairs, and where I handle business and legal affairs for the firm. But I also I'm building out our content arms. We have a newsletter that we write every week called The Joint Account, so I spend a lot of time on that. And we wrote this new book all about couples and money, and a lot about our own experience and how we got where we got.
Amazing.
I'm Douglas Bonaparth, the lesser half of the duo here. I'm the president and founder of Bone Fide Wealth, a wealth management firm located in New York City, and we focus on high-achieving millennials on down. Our whole kind of ethos was investing in people before they could ever invest in us, in the kind of wake of 2008 and 2009, when we had this idea to pursue working with our peers. I'm a certified financial planner, sit on the CFP board's ambassadors for New York, a few councils like CNBC's Digital Advisor Council, as well as Investopedia's. And this has been quite the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been a subscriber to your newsletter, The Joint Account, for a few years now. So
Awesome.
I love it. So if you don't already subscribe, you should subscribe. And was that kind of where it started, this conversation about writing a book together, about money together? Or tell us about how you started The Joint Account versus where the book came to be.
Well, the joint account came about around the same time that we decided to write this book. Doug and I were writing separate Substacks at the time. His was primarily more for the typical personal finance enthusiast. His was focused mostly on, the topics that a financial advisor would typically cover for people who consume that type of content. And I was writing more of on a wide range of topics for women, but there was a lot of cross-pollination in what we were talking about. And when I joined the firm and we thought about what also the next phase and era of what we wanted our thought leadership to be, like Doug mentioned, like we founded this firm around our peers and around what we were experiencing. And I think what made that so appealing to so many clients at the time was that we were so relatable. We were going through it at the same time. And as we grew up and as we encountered our own unique struggles in the early years of parenting and juggling work, career, money, watching the power dynamics in our own relationships shift, we started to see that like a lot of what we thought we had figured out in those years that I wrote that first book, that we wrote that book together and that we thought we had it all figured out, we didn't have anything figured out. That life is so much more dynamic than you think it will be. And we wanted to start writing about that in a way that other people weren't, because we thought to ourselves, if we had such a hard time covering these topics, and we are like industry professionals. I got a 20-year industry veteran as a husband, and a corporate lawyer, and who's, not at a loss for words ever. And if we were having a difficult time covering these topics, what else wasn't being said? What needs to be said? So when we approached the idea of the book, it was right around the same time we said, what would happen if we brought together our two newsletters in the most obvious name possible and call it the joint account? And the idea being that Doug will write about money from the way that a financial advisor in his shoes writes about money, from a very quantitative side of things, usually. And I'll write about it from the other side, from the side that someone who maybe isn't as interested or engaged, or is looking for more stories they find relatable on the human side of money, on consumer behavior, on labor and time, which I would tell you is one of our greatest currencies. And I wanted to write about equity and things from that standpoint, in hopes that we not only broaden our audience, but we find something that two spouses can sit down and find palatable and enjoyable to read together and say, like, maybe we actually have more to talk about than we thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you bring up an interesting point, because you've been together a long time, right? So you've evolved as you met in college, correct?
Yeah.
We did.
That's freshman.
Freshman
As-
year of
Freshman in college. Oh
We
my
were
gosh.
we were such kids.
Yeah, that's young.
We were
Yeah.
kids,
Very
but
young.
I would tell you, we told what I tell anyone, which is we lived the life cycle of a lot of marriages before we even got married. Like there was almost like the college era, then I moved to New York, then there was like a not so great era for us for a while, and then we started our adult lives together after I finished law school, and we said let's start this as the adults that we are now, that as the people we've grown into, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And now working together, which is probably a whole different dynamic, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yes and no, right? Like, I feel like I've been collaborating with Heather for as long as we've been together. Obviously, more so that we work together, but a lot of what got us to the inflection point of Heather joining the firm was her being my co-pilot, since founding this firm. Think of it like this: there hasn't been a day that I've been a financial advisor that I haven't been with Heather. Right? She's been on this journey for all of those 20 years, well, either indirectly or very directly where we are right now. So, um, you know, getting to working together needed to evolve from like lip service to action, right?
There was a point where I kind of was like, I've been doing this work. I've been moonlighting as your business consultant for the last decade plus of my life. And I'm either not going to be involved anymore. I'm not weighing in. I don't want to hear about it. Like, enjoy
yeah,
a nice life. And have a nice life, and I hope the firm, I hope it works out for the best.
have a nice life. And you live in the same house.
Have a nice life with your work. Like,
Yeah.
See
you for dinner.
I'll see you for dinner. No, but there was definitely a point where I said to him, it's not fair. It's not fair to have your cake and eat it too. Like, you love the love the safety of of my corporate job.
Oh yeah.
But you want my consult.
Right. Yeah. It's like, we'll have the benefits and the safety of the corporate job, but then you're really advising on the
I was running myself ragged.
Oh, it went.
It was, but that was a lot of the catalyst for what brought me to the firm. I think there's a world where I just kept trying to do it all forever. Truly. Sometimes, and we see this a lot. We saw this a lot with the couples that we met for the book. Like, you can feel like a dynamic isn't working. You can get totally lost in it, and you can run yourself ragged. But sometimes it takes that external catalyst. Like, yes, I stepped up and I said enough's enough, but the external catalyst was that my corporate job suddenly wanted me back in the office 4 days a week in New York City, mega commuting more days than I was pre-COVID. That was like more than I was going in before COVID.
Oh, wow. So they turned it up. They were like, we'd like you to come back more.
They dialed it. And at a certain point, I just said to him, I said, something is about to change in our life. Like, it's changing no matter what. And I think this is a pivotal moment for us to make a major decision. And that's when I joined the firm.
That's fantastic. But those are tough conversations to have to sit down and I don't know if
Well,
the
yeah,
right renegotiate kind of what the dynamic is going to look like.
I give Heather a ton of credit because, instead of divorcing me, no, I'm just kidding. Instead of, you know, taking it to a place where we couldn't be constructive, with our thoughts and actions, she was able to sit down and explain, the three full-time jobs she was running, how comfortable I had become overnight. Our power structures and earning power
Mhm.
had completely flip-flopped. And, to share that with me, it's not like I didn't know that. She was 100% right that I was very much enjoying the comfort that she was providing as I, took the risk. Now, it wasn't even about taking, the big risk anymore. I took the big risk and built the thing. And now, it's kind of rolling around in it, all willy nilly. She's like, "What are you doing over there?" I'm, busting my butt over here. So I understood that. But what was uncomfortable for me just right from the jump was, oh my God, I'm going to have to make a lot of changes in terms of how I act, operate professionally, personally, from childcare over to how we schedule our calendars to make that room for Heather. Like, I want that thing. I wanted nothing. Yeah, our goal had always been, to
Maybe
work.
someday Heather will join the family business. Like, that's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
kind of a thing. But I
But
think
now it's knocking on your door. Sorry, hon, it's knocking on your door, and you have the realization of what that really means. And you're like, I was like, oh my God, and this is gonna be hard. This is gonna be hard. You tell someone, hey, you're about to do this really hard thing. How do you feel about that? They're gonna be like, not too great. Like, like you want me to, kind of be. So you get the idea here. Give Heather a ton of credit, and obviously I care about her and I love her very much, and I've always known her to be extraordinarily ambitious. She is my muse. I am certainly not hers, and that's okay. And we made room, and we got here. It involved writing a book. It involved defining roles and how we operate in our family. It was a lot of change that we wrestled with, or at least I wrestled. She dealt with a lot of change too, but for me, there was a lot of self work that went into making that happen.
Yeah, and I would imagine this is where your book comes into play, that it's more than just one conversation. It's not just, okay, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to join the family firm. But I would imagine, as you were saying, it's renegotiating everything. So childcare, calendars, income, right? Benefit.
exactly. And when we view ambition and we view career, and really just more generally speaking, power, there's a reason that we wanted to name an entire section power, because we want people to start thinking about it's okay to call power by its name, and you don't have to take power from your partner for you to find it. But an investment in one person will always involve an inherent sacrifice in another when you are in a committed relationship, and that's just a fact. So the issue there is that we didn't acknowledge, and Doug really didn't acknowledge for too long, that the investments we were making in him resulted in a major sacrifice to me. Not only a sacrifice of my time, in the time that I took on caring for the kids and the responsibility when he started earning a lot more, but the sacrifices at work. I had basically plateaued at work. There were not growth opportunities for me at work, and I was pretty much what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I was not encouraged to not look for new jobs, but it was like, why would you look for a new job? Everything's great. It's you can go,
Sure.
you clock in, you clock out, and we're doing great. And look how great the firm's doing. And on paper, yes, that was true. But I wasn't fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was having and getting the time for me and what I wanted. So it's really hard. These are not, and to your point, Barbara, these are not one-time conversations. This is a practice that can take years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what we see put out there is often a fairy tale, right? Or it's not realistic because, as you said, if there's one person whose career is being prioritized, it naturally has to be a sacrifice for the other party.
Yeah, and you know what I think too, particularly for women, I felt, and I'll speak from just myself, but I felt like I was sold from a young age a message that didn't mirror the reality that I experienced when I entered the workplace. I felt like I was told that girls could do it all. and that we were going to be welcomed with open arms into professional settings, especially as a lawyer, that we operate at the utmost professionalism and that we are supported and we are treated exactly the same. That was not my experience. And that experience deteriorated after I had children.
I was just going to ask, did you find that after having children and that being known in the workplace, that changed the perspective of you at work?
Yes, and I think one of the most difficult things for women in those years that you are transitioning into motherhood is not knowing whether these struggles you experience are personal or systemic or institutional or domestic. You don't know, but you're feeling it from a lot of different places. And by design, you are left to question, is it me? Is it my fault that I can't handle all of this? And those messages turn into messages like, well, my husband's now making 3 times my salary, so why even bother to try at work?
Yeah, and even in your book, you stated because you interviewed couples and experts, but I think that one of the experts said with couples, often the household tasks fall more on the women's shoulders, just based on studies, and we
Oh,
saw that, yeah, with Fair Play written by Eve, right? That she almost got divorced over blueberries and was like, "Wait, what's
yep.
happening?" I think in your book, you have it was a croissant at 7-Eleven the couple was having a problem with.
They had a problem with the croissant. For me, my blueberry was a sock on the steps,
Yeah.
where it was like, if I have to pick up one more sock from the magic bin that dropped a sock, that the magic bin that empties itself with all the folded clothes that just get put away, and
I
then
really thought you just put stuff in it and it just kept
magic,
coming clean. Like,
but I think this is a great way to put it. Like Doug would say something often that really um, bothered me, and it was that it just gets done. He loved to say that, and I said, "No, I get it done." It is an active statement. There's someone doing it. It doesn't just get done. But I think that that's an important distinction in the language because so much of this is about making the invisible visible and
Yep.
about feeling seen and acknowledged. There's still times, I mean, I still do the lion's share of cooking for our family. I still do the lion's share of laundry for a family. It's not just about the breakdown of responsibilities. It's about the acknowledgement of
Mhm.
all the work at home and earning an income that gets treated in similar ways. It's just as much about the acknowledgement.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's what you talk about in the book, right? So it's not just about who's earning the money, but also the valuation of time because it
Exactly.
takes more
right.
than money for a household to run, right? We need
That's right.
money, but then we also need someone with time and bandwidth.
Making sure that you view contribution as a much under a much wider lens, right? Cast a wide net of what you believe it means to contribute. Because I think a lot of times when you ask somebody, they're thinking about money. That's the only thing they're thinking about. Well, I contribute this. This is my income. And then he contributes that. Well, but look at all the other ways you care for the people you love. So many of those enable him or enable you to go out and earn that income. It is
Yes.
Neha Rush says this, and she's the founder of the Power Pause. And I love when she says this, that marriage is an interdependent organization. And that is the way with your money, your time, your labor, that is the way you need to be viewing it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you interview a lot of couples throughout the book, which is always interesting because there is no one size fits all, and everyone does it has some people like get together really young and can grow up together, and then other people meet later in life or get married first time and then married a second time. And I'm sure you see it all with sitting with clients, right? You see all different types of scenarios, and what works for one person doesn't always work for another. But I think the commonality is there's not a lot of conversation, I think, within couples always about what these dynamics look like. Why do you think that is? Why do you think this is such a hard conversation for couples to have about the breakdown of the delegation of tasks versus income and everything that goes in?
Yeah, because money's more than just money, right? It's not just, the thing that we earn and what we use to spend, save, or invest. It's affixed to, who we are as people, our own identity is. It shows up in our culture, in our religion, in our upbringing. It's pretty much hard coded into our very being.
And
So
and all of those points that we grew up with also dictate the way we treat labor and how we treat our spouses in the home. So, right.
Yeah, it's all conditioning. So you're inherently asking people to, if they're going to play a team game, to number one, do the self work of figuring out who they are in their own relationship with money, going back to those days and unraveling. It could be good things, it could be bad things, it could be food insecurity, it could be an immense amount of privilege. Doesn't matter. It needs to be reconciled so that you have a baseline in which you gain perspective when you eventually start to do that exercise and have those conversations with your partner who's doing their own exploration into their relationship with money. That's phase one. That's hard. And then phase two, arguably as hard, is, bringing these two things together to find the common ground.
I think people are afraid to fail.
Yeah.
I think that they're afraid.
Or let their partner down.
That's what I mean. I don't mean fail even in the marriage. I mean even more in a more micro sense. I think people are afraid to do things they haven't done before, even in the context of their relationship, because they don't want to do it wrong. Like Doug said, they don't want to disappoint their partner. This could be money. This could be things like, well, Doug got in a pattern of not cooking dinner. So he just is afraid that he's not going to cook a good dinner. It's as silly as that, but I really do believe that there is some of that, underlying this, that there is this feeling of what if I don't meet my partner's expectations of me?
Or I don't do it as well, right? I hear a lot, well, but you're better at it.
Yes. And
Then
some of that is a little bit of weaponized incompetence, I think, when I hear that, and I want to roll my eyes, but some of it's very real. And some of it's, this really is a two-person job. Even when we talk about tasks and labor, yes, there's areas where Doug needed to learn to step up, but there were also areas where I needed to let go and to say to him, I showed you how to do this one time and I laid out my expectations, but now I need to let him do it whether he meets them or not. I have to give him a chance to do it, and I can't keep jumping down his throat to fix them either, because and that's not just tasks. That's also things like money. Let's say I'm stepping back into the financial conversations for the first time and I say something wrong, or I'm not approaching it correctly, or I missed something. It's really important that when we talk about space and room to grow and to get better, we're also talking about we're talking about allowing people to make small mistakes.
And being supported.
And
so
being
that you
supported.
can get there.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. I feel like that is definitely a big issue, is if someone has a role and it's their defined role and they're good at it, it is hard for the other person. And especially with women with finance specifically, you talked about in your book, when women are given the chance to check the box, I don't know, they're more likely to do that because it's a confidence issue. And having being part of the conversation and having a seat at the table is maybe asking a question that sounds silly, or you maybe didn't grasp something earlier, but having the confidence to sit there and be supported, to be more engaged with the conversations.
Absolutely. So much of it came down to confidence. And when that I don't know question gets removed from that survey, men and women were scoring virtually the same. But that's why when we talk about confidence in the context of mistakes, and that mistakes should be able to be made to grow. That applies at home, that applies in your money too. There are some mistakes that are just not that big of a deal. And we have to be able to get past them and grow from them and learn from them and move on. Because if we don't, and we keep harping on the little things that didn't go the way that we had planned, that creates that embeds that lack of confidence further and further into someone's mind. And they say, maybe I'm not qualified to be the one who's involved in our finances. When in reality, their partner's saying, hey, that $5,000 of consumer debt you had when we got married, water under the bridge. Today's a new day. You are an adult. You're going to be involved in this. But it's hard. It's hard.
And do you have any takes on why you think it is that women in general, with the studies, have proven to just be less confident when it comes to money, despite scoring more equally if they're given the shot and they have they score almost equally with men, but generally just find themselves not to be as confident?
I just think it has to do with gender equity out in the world. I think that the stories women are told are just I think we find ourselves like, it's the same as what I was saying about like when women become mothers and we don't know who's to blame, whether it's us or them or everyone or everything. I think there's a lot working against us, and there always has been. And I think that the messaging that creates the idea of personal responsibility being conflated with societal responsibility, I think is something that really impacts women and has. Um, and that again, a lot of times, even when the messaging is good, it doesn't reflect the reality that we then experience. And what that does is create so much distance between what we thought we were going to get and what we actually got. And then you're left to believe that you're the reason that it didn't happen. And
It
I
didn't.
would say any number of
Yeah.
we even see that, like, you've seen that in more in recent years, even in, like, corporate, you've seen, like, corporate layoffs and, like, stealth layoffs, right? Like, that's another example of, like, when you'd see something like this. Like, you're, like, meant to believe that you had a choice. Like, you could either, like, take the reorg and take, like, what was an effective demotion and know that it's never going anywhere, or take the money and leave. And you're made to kind of believe that you got to make a decision, and in reality, you really didn't make any decision at all. It was, like, a horrible two choices that both sucked. I think that women experience a lot of that in our life, and that ultimately plays into a lack of confidence when we're then asked like, "Hey, do you wanna take the reins with this, or should we leave this up to our husband?" I mean, I that's the most general way I can put it.
Yeah, these tropes again, from the TV you watched as a kid to what you saw your parents and grandparents do. We're not that far removed from, 1952 or whatever, time period where like equality and you
But
know,
you're right in the sense that it's not just the world we experience now, it's what's been ingrained in our lives from the time that we were young too.
it still carries forward into today and how we consume information. These things are very hard to let go of. Again, very much coded into who we are, almost to the point of it being involuntary when we think about the roles that we assign ourselves in our relationship. Right? They're that sticky.
Because you talk a lot in the book and you open with the money story, right? Like, what was your first memory of money?
Yeah.
Very, I think, is super interesting because, in the day to day, we, as a CFP doing financial planning, you don't really get into the psychology of it, right? It's like, this is what you have, this is what you're looking to do. And I think that's a really fascinating part is that's the imprint that you might start with is something you didn't even realize.
Yeah, I think as practitioners, right, and certified financial planners, if you're sitting down with both, if with a couple, like that's amazing. You got both people doing the number one, prescribed way to, understand what their financial life looks like and plot for their, plan around their goals and what have you. But that doesn't mean they aren't going to have difficulties or struggles in certain areas of their lives. Some of these things don't even kick in till later on in life. They have no idea that there's conflict waiting for them when the kids are getting ready to leave for college, or, what it's like to juggle, as Heather said, two young kids at home that, are there because there's a global pandemic going around. It is next to impossible to figure out, how a lot of these things are going to rear their head in your own relationship, which is why so much of this book is helping individuals or couples rather develop a practice around their communication when it comes to money. And as we mentioned earlier on, it's so much more than money, right? It's how do we learn about each other? How do we create space for one another? How do we fill in for one another or pick up each other's slack? Double down on strengths and, address weaknesses. All of these things require consistency and discipline, and you have no choice, assuming you want to stay together forever, to play the long game, right? And any long game you play in life, from investment and compounding interest all the way over to your physical and mental health, and even your money, require you to develop that practice of consistency and discipline. And I think it's very lost on a lot of smart people and just people in general, compounding, quietly compounding returns, whether that is in the investment portfolio you're hopefully not staring at every day, all the way over to the relationship you have with your spouse. I hope that Heather and I, we thought we had it figured out. Like, really? Think about how silly that is. We really had it all figured out at age 30 just because we bought a house, had a kid, and refinanced some student loan debt. That is the stupidest thing I've heard, come out of my mouth in a long, long time.
It's stupid, but it's
In the
also
moment, it doesn't feel
reflective.
stupid.
It is reflective of the way that we reduce things to make them palatable for us today. Like, look at our internet culture. This like deeply, deeply polarized internet culture, right? Where you're either one thing or the other. You're either this or that. It's black and
Yeah,
white.
tribalism at its finest.
Tribalism at its finest. And also like that, and that the idea of success is that we're all like one like life hack away from changing our life forever. Look at all those headlines that are like 34-year-old decided to leave his job. Now his business earns $80,000 in revenue. How do they do it? When it's like a photo of them.
With a loan, it's usually
Every
with a loan from their dad, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. No, but the point is that like those are the messages that we're consuming day in and day out.
Yes.
And for us to think, and again, we're talking about earlier about women and confidence and where do we still get these messages from? They can be subtle. They can look like this. And they do embed themselves in our subconscious to believe, even if we know better, that, it's not as simple as, the 38-year-old left his job and now is making. But when you read it over and over again, you start to believe like, should I still be there? Should we be optimized for that? Where are we supposed to be right now? Because what I'm consuming is telling me that what I'm doing is not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that they put out on social media and even in the media, because I see all those articles, usually on CNBC, right?
There's a
Like
lot of
retired at 41,
yeah.
living abroad. And you're like, what did I do wrong?
I'm like deep in those algos too of women who have like they're like trust yourself. Everything's like trust, and I do believe in a lot of that. But I'm like, it's kind of like the new hustle porn. Like it's become like so overly simplistic. And I'm like, there's just a lot we're not seeing here. We're leaving a lot of the details out of this narrative. And a
And the
lot.
honesty behind what was the decision, what was the sacrifice,
Yes.
right? 'Cause it's not
Yes.
always all sunshine and rainbows.
Right. It's not something you can cap cut down to 20 seconds in your real life because, like Doug and I, like, even now, like putting this book out in the world was a lot of work. It was very stressful. Even as it was coming out, like we have had to level set so many times and say to each other, like, I don't think that you're in the right headspace about this next month. Or I think that maybe you're not enjoying this as much as you should be. Even things like that. Like it requires constant work and reframing to keep up with the practice of saying like, we've got to do a better job here because I feel like I'm losing you to XYZ. And I think that a lot of people just have never considered checking in with their spouse that way.
Right, or having it be more of a practice, right?
Right.
So, like you said, that you had a catalyst, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was when they said you need to come back to the office more days, and then Douglas, your business is doing better. That was your catalyst to reevaluate, right?
That was the catalyst to make a decision that I think we could have sat on for a really long time because I think we also like one of the easiest ways. I mean, look, it's a wonderful problem to have, but I think it's very easy to check out when things are good.
Mhm.
And frankly, like uh, you know, take it for what it is, but things on paper for us during COVID were very good. We had 2 income, God willing, and we were very privileged. We had 2 incomes. We both got to work from home and be supported by our jobs. We were saving money in many respects. Like things looked good on paper. Um, and I think that it's really hard to make change when you don't have to.
Yeah. When everything looks good. But as you're saying, it's more than just the money, right? This conversation with couples and your relationship is more than just
Right.
having money because you can have money and still not be happy.
Well, and so what's interesting is that like a lot of what even when we talk about childhood trauma, like the person that we interviewed that wasn't me sharing my story in that section, but the other person we interviewed experienced a lot of childhood trauma, and he is wildly successful as an adult. And the point, I think one of the reasons I wanted to use his story is to in that to prove this point was that like it's really easy just to say, well, it all worked out. So I guess I should just brush it under
This
because
is the individual who had a ton of accolades at, like, 31.
yes,
Wait, right, okay.
yes,
You have to I won't give it away, you have to read the book to
right. But I think it's really easy for a lot of people to even diminish their own pain, their own story, their own feelings that they affix to money. Because if things are going well, why would we talk about the fact that I could be making millions of dollars, but I've got a scarcity mindset, or I'm afraid to invest, but I'm
Yeah.
sitting on a mountain of cash like Scrooge McDuck. And it's easy like for people to say like, like, what's it matter to you? Even to your partner, like, what's matter to you? Like, we're successful. It's fine. But like you're still not getting at the root of what's underlying the way that you approach money. And there's a reason that the two of you aren't coming together to do this as a team.
and that's where the issues start to bubble up, like you were saying that everything could seem fine, and then there's this catalyst, right? Because you're coming at it from these different money experiences, right, that were ingrained with you with the different how you were brought up and what happened with your family, and you don't even realize it's affecting your decision making.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So fascinating.
I thought so. And enough to spend 2 years talking to couples all the time about money. And like I think one of the coolest parts was that we didn't talk a lot about dollars and cents when we spoke to them.
So I think that is a fascinating piece in the book. I feel like, one perspective might be if a finance book, right? There'd be like, put this much towards the budget and then, right, all of that. But it's really more about the psychology of money and how you were brought up and what you remember and how that's impacting how you show up in a relationship and impacting the dynamics of your relationship regarding it.
Exactly. And still
As
and
a
it is about like our perceived conditions too, both then and now. Because I think that the relationship work is yours, mine, and ours. And I think that just gets lost on a lot of people, rightfully so.
Absolutely. I'm the son of a CFP, and I can always remember my dad saying, "Hey, you know, the dollars, the money, that's the easy part. Putting ourselves in the shoes of our clients, that's the hard part." And I think so much of that talks about trying to figure out, how they're thinking, what makes them tick, so they can make the best decisions for themselves, right? And that's no different than, whether we do that in practice or individuals and couples are able to do this type of work on their own. All roads lead to, right, happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction, and the goals that you have for yourself, right? So it's really deep, deep stuff, right? None of this is a dress rehearsal. You get one shot at it, and you might as well make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this whole so fascinating, and I want to ask you one last question to wrap it up. What would be one tangible tip for our listeners if they're listening to this and saying, "We struggle with money as a couple. It's a pain point for us." What w- what would be your one piece of advice besides reading the book?
Who do you want to go first, Doug? We'll each give one, because if not, we'll go nuts if we don't each give one.
You each get
Yeah.
one. Heather, why don't you go first?
Um, I would say that this is a practice, which I know we spoke about, but that you don't get to win at money once. This is something that you will do your whole life, and that you should embrace the positivity behind that, which is, if you love someone, don't you want to be curious about them? Don't you want more of them? And I don't mean more of them like in the proximate sense of that you literally need to be affixed at the hip with them at all times. Don't you want their fullest self? Don't you want every piece of their dreams to be realized? Don't you want to understand what makes them tick, what they're fearful of, what they're excited for? The purpose of this book is to make room for all of that. That is a practice. That's not a 10-step solution to optimize for your best life. That's real life. And so that's what I would tell people. It's about perspective shifting.
I don't know how to really add to that, but I guess I gotta, throw my hat in the ring here. Yeah, I mentioned just a second ago about happiness, right? I think we all are trying to achieve that, right? If not, what are we trying to achieve here? So I can't think of a better way to make an effort to be happier than to work with the person that you love in a way that allows you to be seen and heard and supported and loved. All of those very fluffy, nice things in
I'm
my mind.
shocked you didn't say the thing that I thought you were going to say, so now I have to say it. I'm sorry, Barbara. But yeah, I wanted to leave them with a tangible tip because I think Barbara would have liked a
No,
tangible.
that was going to be, do you want happiness? That's not really a
No.
tangible thing. Yeah.
Time and place matter more than almost anything when it comes to talking with your partner about money. So many conversations.
Really important there. I do this to Heather all the time in the past. I'd finish a meeting during the crazy family rush hour time of like 3 to 7. You got to hear this out. She's like, what are you doing? Like, this is chaos in here. And she would return the favor at like 11:30 at night and say, hey, I got to dump all this stuff on you right now. I know you're half asleep drooling on yourself, but let's do this. And I was just like, what's happening? Why? So time and place definitely matter. It's part of this larger construction of how you facilitate these conversations. But yeah, that's one actionable thing. I think that goes a really, really long way. If you're excited listening to this, if you read the book and you're ready to get started, time and place matter. Make sure you carve it out so that you can be effective. You don't want to turn, good intentions into bad outcomes.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I really appreciate it. I love chatting with both of you. This has been amazing. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find the book and then how to subscribe to your Substack?
Sure.
Sure.
Book is available everywhere books. Sorry, Doug. The books are available everywhere books are sold, but you can also find our home base at domoneytogether.com. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, helping couples talk about money. It's called The Joint Account, which you can find at readthejointaccount.com. We're both very visible online. So if you look up at Doug Bonaparth or at Average Joelle, you will usually find us doing something silly on the internet, which is kind of just for your own amusement. But that's it.
Well, thank you both so much. And for our lovely listeners, you can find us at www.futurerichpodcast.com.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Time for our disclaimer. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results. Make sure that you consult with your own legal, tax, and/or financial advisor before making any decisions.